here we are. Ladies and gentlemen, after 18 reviews, we have finally made it to the beginning of the end. Avengers Infinity War. First of all, I know I usually start out these videos with a joke or a bit, but I just wanted to say thank you guys for the support on this series. Making these videos has been awesome, and I'm super excited to share these last ones with you so I can get onto a bunch of cool videos after the Infinity Saga rewatch is over. Got a lot of things planned, like the usual 23 movies ranking, and also other Secret Infinity Saga related projects, so look forward to those. For now though, enjoy this picture of Invisible Drax. He may be standing right behind you, and you wouldn't know, just casually eating his Argnut. This is the big one, so yeah, if you didn't know already, massive spoilers ahead for Avengers Infinity War and the MCU. You've been warned. So, seeing as this is the biggest MCU movie so far, I thought I'd do things a little differently this time. In the past reviews, I've sort of bounced back and forth between different aspects of the movie and positives and negatives like characters, stories, villains, things like that. But I think Infinity War and Endgame deserve a little extra attention. I fully anticipate that this will be my longest review to date, by far. So, this time around, I'm going to skim over those aspects of the film to begin with, but for the most part, I'm going to be doing a more in-depth analysis of the movie, going from scene to scene, discussing specific aspects of the film as we go along. For Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain Marvel, and probably Spider-Man Far From Home, I'll most likely go back to the original style of reviewing since those are smaller movies, but I think Infinity War and Endgame deserve some extra love. Without further ado, let's get started. So the film opens by continuing directly with the post-credit scenes of Thor Ragnarok, where we see the Asgardians basically ravaged. Right away, I had to commend the Russos, because we haven't really seen much of Thanos in the MCU leading up to this, and they were promising, oh yeah, Thanos is super powerful, blah 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 blah, but I was like, alright, then show me. And yeah, they showed me. I absolutely love how grim the opening of this movie is, because this film shouldn't treat itself like Guardians 2, for example, where it's just fun and games for the most part. This film is serious and it knows it, and right away, there's such a huge air of desperation in this movie, and I love that so much. The opening is narrated by one of the members of the Black Order, Ebony Maw. Now, let's talk about the Black Order for a little bit. What do I think about introducing 4 new separate characters that are essentially cannon fodder for the heroes? Honestly, I'm fine with it. Are they the most memorable characters in the world? Not really, especially everyone other than Ebony Maw, who really is the best member of the Black Order. That being said, they do serve their purpose. While yes, they're just fodder for our heroes to go through, they are at least a little more menacing than the faceless Outriders. You do get the sense that they are more powerful in their own right, which is really good. So while the characters themselves may not have been the greatest, they do serve their purpose, and honestly, again, I'm totally fine with that. We see Thanos, and we can assume from the framing of the shot that he basically destroyed Thor off screen in a fight because Thor looks, well, not good, to say the least. That's a really good example of show don't tell. I mean, the Russos could have easily extended the running time of this movie another 30 minutes and made it as long as Endgame and showed us the destruction of Xandar and showed Thanos smacking around Thor, but they instead let us as the audience draw the conclusion for ourselves, which is great. We then get to see our first good look at Thanos in the movie, and wow. When I first saw this movie in theaters, my jaw dropped. I mean, I expected something good, like maybe Ultron level good of CGI, but I didn't in my wildest imagination expect the Thanos CGI to be this good. I mean, seriously, if you told me Josh Brolin was wearing prosthetics, I would have believed you. The animation and motion capture is astoundingly excellent, and for that alone, this movie deserves massive kudos. Because if we don't believe in Thanos on a visual level, we wouldn't believe that he had the power to destroy the Avengers. So, job well done, animators and CGI artists. Loki offers up the Tesseract as a misdirect, and we get to see the Hulk-Thanos fight, which again, for just being 2 CGI creatures fighting each other in a fist fight, it is superbly well done. I mean, comparing it directly to the end of Black Panther, this is just miles ahead of whatever that final fight was. And then we get to see Thanos just obliterate the Hulk hand-to-hand without the stones, which sets up his danger immediately. I mentioned before show don't tell, but also there does need to be a little bit of a mix, because this is visual storytelling. If Hulk was just lying off-screen, beaten up when the movie started, and Thanos was like, alright, let's do this, find the stones, the audience wouldn't really get a sense of how powerful he was. So it's fine to me that they did it with Thor off-screen, but they needed to show it with Hulk on-screen, or at least with another hero who's as powerful as the Hulk. And I'm glad that they did. I mean, so far I've literally 0 complaints with this movie. The first few minutes of Infinity War are just breathtaking. So next, Thanos kills Heimdall, because Heimdall sends Hulk portaling away to Earth, which, yeah, I mean, was a little quick. But I mean, we got 2.5 hours to go, so it's fine. And then we get to Loki's death. Now, I have no problems with the way that it's done. I really don't. And I think it was good for the character to kill him here, up front, because again, he needs to show, Thanos I mean, that he means business. I just kind of wish that they framed it a little bit more seriously. The way that Thanos just casually grips Loki's neck, while Loki just kind of stands there waiting to be choked to death, is a little awkward to me. It feels a little staged, you know? And Loki, the god of mischief, his only resort at this point was a hidden dagger. Seems like a rather dull move on his part, honestly. This is just me speaking as a fan, but I would have loved in his final moments if he channeled both sides of his heritage, both as the son of Laufey and the son of Odin. To be the Odinson, but also to establish and unleash his frost giant powers one last time. Because since the First Thor, we've never seen him use the powers again, and I kind of miss that. I mean, I'm just saying, if I were Loki, I would be spraying literally everybody with ice. Did you see what he did to Heimdall? Minor nitpick, but still, there it is. So the prologue ends and Hulk is sent to Earth to meet Doctor Strange and Wong, and within these 10 minutes or so, so much is already established. For one, Thanos is scary, and he's on a mission. For another, he's not afraid to do what has to be done, like killing Loki, Heimdall, ravaging the Asgardians. And on the flip side, yeah, Thor is severely outmatched. And we haven't even gotten to the Avengers logo yet. After we get to see the opening logo, and by the way, shout out to the Russos again for their attention to detail. It would have been very tempting for them to just make a different Avengers-style title card that they saw fit, but they stuck with the one that Whedon had established with the 2 previous Avengers films with the same fonts and all of that. And I think that's great. It gives the 4 Avengers films continuity and consistency, I think. Anyway, small note, but yeah, good job, guys. So now we get to see Tony and Pepper, and to be honest, this scene isn't super consequential or anything. It's really more foreshadowing and setting up for Endgame, where Pepper and Tony name drop Morgan as the name of their child. Honestly, this scene is pretty forgettable, and the fact that Stephen Strange just portals out of nowhere in the middle of New York without anybody noticing is a little suspicious to me. Seems like people would notice a wizard appearing out of nowhere, even in the MCU, but oh well. Basically, from here on out, we get some exposition dumps. And yeah, it's a little clunky. Wong and Strange are basically giving Tony a PowerPoint presentation on the Infinity Stones and how they work and what they are. To be fair though, while I do think this is clunky, I also think that it was absolutely necessary to have this in the movie. Because I do believe that there is a small contingent of people who came into Infinity War having seen none of the previous MCU films. So this scene is actually super important in terms of establishing the general purpose of the story. Because at the very least, if the general movie-going audience didn't understand why in the world Thor is missing an eye, they can at least understand that this crazy, powerful purple guy is trying to get magic stones, which was also set up in the opening prologue. So fine. Works for me. And then we get to what I like to call the Second Battle of New York. I've alluded to this before, but since we're here, I would be remiss if I didn't mention it again. Cue the clip. Yeah, that's not great. There are just a few shots in this movie where Iron Man just looks like he's straight out of a video game, especially on Titan. And we'll get there, but it always throws me out of the movie for a couple seconds. And in this scene, I like the transition of the nanomot surrounding Tony from the arc reactor and all of that. What I don't like is the final suit up. Call me old-fashioned, but I really like the helmet snapping onto his head with a clank, you know? Like in the original Mark III suit up. That felt good, like the pieces were snapping into place the way that they were supposed to. But I'm sorry, as soon as you get into the nanotech, it looks like they're trying to make a mold of Tony Stark or something. Like they're trying to coat him in some sort of clay, and it's pretty airtight, and it just looks like he's walking around in rubber. Maybe that's just me, who knows? Again though, poor visuals, especially if they're just here or there, because there are shots that I do think the Mark 50 does look good in this film, don't necessarily make or break a movie. We also get to see the interactions of Stephen Strange and Tony Stark for the first time. Now look, for all the good that the Russos do in writing dialogue for these characters that they've never worked with before, Stephen Strange was not one of them. I know it's funny, haha, Tony breaks the fourth wall and is like, who says hitherto undreamt of? But no, really. Who in the world does say hitherto undreamt of? Why is Strange being so edgy the entire movie? I'm sorry, Doctor Strange was a New Yorker before he was the Sorcerer Supreme. He wasn't from Middle Earth. What are we doing here? Hitherto undreamt of? Anyways, just a minor nitpick. It was funny the first time I saw it, and never since. Thought I'd point it out. Visually though, and in action, seeing Tony and Strange fighting side by side is pretty cool, I will admit. I wish we got to see a little more of that, like Strange somehow enhancing Tony's nanotech through his spells, but at any rate, yeah, it was pretty cool. Science and magic coming together. And also, beginning in these scenes, we see the beginning of Bruce Banner's 2-movie arc as the Hulk refuses to come out. Now look, I know the Russos have said over and over that no, a simple rematch with Thanos in Endgame isn't a good enough payoff. It's too generic, blah 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 blah. Okay, fine. I get that. You want to be original? Fine. Smart Hulk was definitely unexpected. That's totally fine. I get it. Thematically, at least, Smart Hulk works. Because Bruce and Hulk have been at odds for so long that after the back and forth in Ragnarok, the only two ways to go is either in complete polar opposite directions of full Hulk and full Banner being completely separate entities, or reconciliation. So yeah, thematically it makes sense. At the same time, while yes, unity is what you set up, what you also set up is redemption for Bruce and the Hulk, because he got whooped at the beginning of Infinity War. And in Endgame, I don't care if it was Smart Hulk or Berserker Hulk, though I would have mostly preferred the Berserker Hulk. You pay off Hulk, and you pay off Hulk right. Unfortunately, they didn't. The reason I'm talking about Endgame here is because Bruce Banner's arc to me, with the Hulk in this film, is pretty contingent on what they decided to do in Endgame. On his own, looking at this as a self-contained movie, no, I don't think he works that well. But he had the potential to work out really, really well if they set him up right and paid it off well in Endgame. So yeah, Bruce Banner's in this movie. Not a huge fan, honestly. But you know who I am a huge fan of, especially after Homecoming, is Peter Parker. And yeah, he's back, and I love the way he just naturally integrates himself into the fight. And I mean, I've said it so many times, but I love Peter Parker in the MCU, and he's great here as well. As for the action itself in the Battle of New York version 2, yeah, the Russos know how to do action. While this may not have been the most groundbreaking fight in the history of ever, the fundamentals of this are done right. The way the camera moves, the cuts, the edits, the cinematography, the choreography, it feels so natural, it feels scrappy, and the heroes get to show off their powers. Love it. Well done, Russos. After the fight ends and Tony and Peter get shot up into space, we cut to space. And guess what it says? Space. Well done again, Russos. Attention to detail. Because this is a really nice and subtle way of letting the audience know that we're transitioning to a different group in the Guardians, and the tone is shifting. Like I said before, I'm fine with pop music in movies as long as, in almost all cases, Thor Ragnarok notwithstanding, they're coming from an actual source from within the movie. And we all know that the Guardians love their music. So I got no problems with Rubber Band Man here. And yeah, welcome back the Guardians. It's crazy to think that it was literally less than 12 months since we last saw them at the time of this movie's release, because 3 whole other movies were released in between. And so when they reappear, it's refreshing to see them again, especially during the Infinity Saga rewatch. You've been watching heroes like Spider-Man, Thor, and Black Panther, and now you get back to the Guardians, which is great. And you guys know, I love the Guardians a lot more now, especially during this rewatch. They just clicked with me, especially Peter and Gamora, which will pay off in a bigger way much later in this movie. And then they run into Thor. Now again, while I do enjoy this scene where the Guardians interact with Thor, a completely new and different character for the first time, I will admit that this probably is one of my least favorite scenes in the movie. In essence, this scene has sort of lost its novelty to me. The first time I saw it, it was super cool to see them together, and we all loved that. And the dialogue is still as snappy and as fun as ever. But I mean, we've seen time travel and Nick Fury's scroll since then. So I don't know, I feel like the bar has been raised, and it's just kind of lost its originality to me. That being said, while I think within itself in this movie, it makes some sense that Thor, having been beaten badly by Thanos, would think that he needs to get an axe. In another sense, wasn't the entire point of the last movie, Thor Ragnarok, that he didn't need a weapon? In that sense, Thor's arc within this movie is a little odd to me. Also, it seems kind of blatant that the Russos just wanted Thor out of the way for the majority of the movie so that he can make a grand entrance later. And while yeah, that totally paid off later, it's still pretty noticeable when you return to them on Nidavellir that it's been like an hour and a half since we've last seen them. However, moving to Scotland, this is around when you begin to realize how many different characters the Russos are switching between and juggling. Is it a little much? Yeah. It's definitely one of the strengths that Endgame has over this movie, the fact that they're able to just focus on one group of heroes instead of having to constantly switch between a bunch of them. Because by the time we get back to Tony and Peter and Strange, presumably 5 or so minutes after the last scene ended, it's been, maybe an hour for us? It's just a sacrifice that you have to make when making a film this large, and you know what? I'm totally fine with it. Because they did the absolute best that they could with the amount of characters that they were dealing with, and to be quite honest, it doesn't really bother me that much. I think the reason for that is just because each scene is so enjoyable, so funny and watchable, and just significant to the entire story. Wanda and Vision together feel a little more organic now, especially because you get to see Paul Bettany, which is always a plus. But I will say that it's pretty clear to me how much they depowered Vision to make him more vulnerable in this movie. Because in the last couple films, he was basically invincible, and now he's getting stabbed left and right with, regular blades. Just a small nitpick or trade-off that had to be made to make this story more tangible, which again, I'm fine with. The action, as per usual, is fantastic, but it doesn't really get good until we get to the train station. Because guess who's back? Yep, Captain America, and he has a sick beard. And this entrance is awesome. And by the way, you know why his entrance is awesome? One word: music. As someone who really appreciates and listens and looks for the musical scores in the movies, I know, and I hope you guys do as well, that music literally makes or breaks a film. You think Portals would have been nearly as impactful without Alvin Silvestri's score? Or Lord of the Rings without Howard Shore? Star Wars without John Williams? Absolutely not. And guys, Silvestri's score here is just off the charts good. I've said it before, and I will say it again. He deserves so much more credit than he gets. He really does. In Infinity War, he only really uses the Avengers theme a few times, selectively, and that makes it that much more noticeable when he does. He uses it here for Steve, as well as for Thor later, and the action scene that accompanies it somehow takes all the preceding action to another level. These so-called secret Avengers are gritty and scrappy, and I love that about them. And the way that Cap, Nat, and Sam are fighting, they're not pulling their punches. I really do like that there's hidden, unspoken character development from between Civil War and Infinity War. The Gamora backstory scene that follows is fine. And honestly, the only reason it's there is to set up Vormir, which I'm fine with. Although, to be quite honest with you guys, I didn't really find it that helpful to me as an audience member. We'll get back to this later when we reach Vormir, but when Thanos pushed Gamora off, I was like, huh? You loved her? And when the Guardians reach nowhere, and when Gamora breaks down crying after killing Thanos, I just didn't buy it. The so-called fiercest woman in the galaxy, who tells her own boyfriend to literally kill her before Thanos can, breaks down after she stops a genocidal maniac that she never loved, and who never loved her, from destroying half the universe. What? I will say though, in regards to the Nowhere scene, Chris Pratt's acting is really great here. He isn't an Oscar-caliber actor, at least not from what I've seen, but his dramatic acting chops in this scene are really great actually, and I applaud him for that. He really sells the fact that he loves Gamora that much that he's willing to kill her to protect her and the rest of the universe. Speaking of jumping around, we're back to the Avengers compound. Man, this movie has a lot going on. So yeah, we get a nice little reunion scene here, and to be honest, I'm sort of glad that they dropped the whole Bruce and Nat thing. Although, they should have kept it for one purpose and one purpose only if they were going to do something. If Nat dies in Endgame and it causes Bruce to go berserk, then I would have totally kept that angle. I mean, can you imagine Thanos taunting Bruce about Natasha's death and him just going insane? But they didn't do that, so it's fine. Cut it, no big deal. And then they have a little philosophical discussion about trading lives, which I like. It's sort of the undercurrent of the movie, so to speak. Thanos was willing to make sacrifices where the Avengers weren't, and essentially that's why he won. And then the Avengers won in Endgame because they did make those sacrifices with Nat and Tony, and also kind of with Hulk, and ruining his arm. So yeah, I think this is a really compelling and good juxtaposition of what makes Thanos such a good villain. We'll dig deeper into him as a villain when we get further along. And then we head to Wakanda for a quick second to catch up with Bucky. And yeah, he gets a new arm. That really doesn't do anything. Boo. I just wish they did something with it, like added a hidden rocket launcher into it or something. That and Loki being a frost giant, two small details and missed opportunities that they could have easily added. Oh well. Finally, we're back to Tony and Peter as they figure out a way to save Strange. Did Ebony Maw kind of go out like a wimp? Yeah, a little bit. But hey, he needs to be out of this movie somehow, and we love Peter's movie references. Although, when Tony and Strange are arguing about where to go, whether they go to Titan or go back to New York, well, it seems a little too contrived to me. It was like the writers were really trying to plot a convincing argument of why the Avengers would be heading off to Titan, when it really doesn't serve that too big of an advantage, I don't think. Maybe a tiny bit of surprise because Thanos doesn't realize that Strange isn't alone at first, but other than that, no, not really. Still, they're headed off to Titan, and the movie goes on. Oh, and by the way, Peter Parker's now an Avenger because his character arc in Spider-Man Homecoming doesn't mean anything at all. Anyways. Joking aside, it's kind of funny to me how this film kind of throws away the arcs of Ragnarok and Homecoming, two films preceding it. Does it bother me? Not particularly. I mean, for heaven's sakes, Thor gets his eye back in the next scene. It's go time, and at this point, it's totally fine. They want to make Thor quote-unquote aesthetically pleasing again with another eye? Fine. Would I have preferred he had his eye patch? Yeah, honestly, because it's lasting damage, right? Consequences. But whatever, not a huge deal. It'll be worth it when he drops into Wakanda. Now, Peter Dinklage. He's a brilliant actor, but something about the character of Eitri seems a little bit weird to me. a little bit out of nowhere. See, this is where it's really difficult to introduce even more new characters into a film like Infinity War because it's just that full, you know? But whatever, it's Peter Dinklage. Thor needs the axe, that's fine, we'll go with it. With these movies, there's always something you need to suspend your disbelief about, and if it's the fact that there's a giant dwarf who can just make Titan-killing weapons on call, then fine. Whatever you say, movie. But hey, it wouldn't be an Avengers film without Avengers vs. Avengers action. Every single one of these Avengers films has had an Avengers v Avengers scene, and honestly, I love that. Almost like a mini Civil War in these movies. It's great. And this time around, while the fight isn't very long, it's certainly super entertaining. See, when the Iron Man suit is inside a building, I think at least, his suit looks a lot better. For some reason, the animators can't really get the coloring right to make it look realistic when it's outdoors. But when the suit is inside, like when he's fighting Quill, for example, and when you have those little mini arc reactor lights glowing, it looks a lot better. And the dialogue here is just awesome. When they're questioning each other to try to figure out who they are, and when they're trying to figure out a plan, see, this is what Infinity War was supposed to be. A film in which these disparate characters who had no right to be in the same room are coming together and meshing in some strange way. I love that about this movie. The character combinations are impeccable. But now we get to talk about the real goodies because the next scene sees Thanos and Gamora arrive on Vormir. Now before this movie came out, there was so much speculation about where the Soul Stone could be. Was it in Wakanda? Is it why the Outriders were there? Some people even speculated that it was Captain America because they saw a hint of orange in his eyes in some still frame from some trailer. Paranoid Marvel fans, am I right? But it ended up being in a completely different location, and honestly, that's totally good too. However, I think putting it in Wakanda, though it would have been kind of weird that a ton of these stones are on Earth, would make it seem a little more realistic that the Black Order would send an entire army into Wakanda. If they were searching for the stone, then it would make sense that they send this entire massive army of Outriders, because otherwise it seems a little excessive and mindless. Anyways, wait, who's that? It's Red Skull. The Russos have said that they could have just put anyone there, and they thought, well, why not put Red Skull? And honestly, I can totally get behind that. Seriously, why not Red Skull, right? He's there, and so use him. And now there's plenty of opportunity for him to go do something else now that he's, free in either timeline. Although I guess in the alternate timeline, Cap returned the stone, and that would have been really funny to see. Do Infinity Stones come with gift receipts? Don't know. Let's talk about the sacrifice itself. Was it as emotionally resonant as the filmmakers probably wanted it to be? No, I don't think so. Did I feel that much emotion? No, and honestly, it's not because I didn't like the Gamora character, I did. But if you kill Spider-Man, and we'll get to that later, you have my attention. The only emotion I did get was actually out of the small details that they put on Thanos' face. They didn't have to give him any dialogue. Just by showing the tears on his face, did I suddenly feel a little bit of empathy for this character. A little bit. So now we move into the final act, and this is where I'll sort of be talking about it holistically, melding in different parts of Titan, Nidavellir, and Wakanda, not necessarily in order. Let's get the Nidavellir part out of the way. Look, I get it. Thor is powerful. But a dying star? Whoa. Talk about power disparity. How did he not die? And how did Stormbreaker just magically revive him? The only reason you don't really question it in the movie is because, well, it's Thor, I guess. The movie's gotta move, right? Let's backtrack a little bit. So you have the Wakanda battle, and I do love the tension here. Because while yes, the battle is a huge mess of CGI and all of that, and it's probably not my favorite part of this movie, I do think that that's exactly the point. Because the point is Vision. They're trying to get the stone out of Vision's head. Every bit of strategy makes sense. Okoye jokingly asks why Wanda was in that room the entire time, but there's a very, very good reason for it. It was to destroy Vision's stone as soon as it was ready. And yeah, the action is action for action's sake, let's be honest. You're never really going to recapture the stakes of Civil War, where the heroes are legitimately trying to beat each other up. But gotta say, nothing makes me happier when Chadwick Boseman yells Wakanda forever and he and Steve Rogers charge into battle. Because that's what makes Marvel special. But let's be real. The real moment of this fight comes when Thor busts into Wakanda. I mean, wow. First of all, I think what makes this moment special is because it was unexpected. See, moments in movies aren't necessarily good on their own. There's a whole combination of factors. For example, the circle shot in the Avengers would have been so much better if it hadn't been shown in the marketing. But even aside from this, even aside from showing it in the trailers, Thor coming into Wakanda was out of left field for me. For whatever reason, from seeing all the trailers and everything leading up to Infinity War, I was positive that Thor was going to be in space the entire movie. Like, it didn't even remotely cross my mind that he was going to Wakanda. In fact, even when I was watching the movie for the first time, and his fingers began to sparkle, I was like, oh yeah, he's going to get revived by the axe, and he's going to Titan to destroy Thanos. And even then, when the scene transitions to Wakanda and something bright starts wrecking the Outriders as the heroes are down to their last legs, I still didn't think it was Thor. I thought it was some Wakandan tech or something. So it was only when Thor quite literally appeared out of nowhere on the screen that I remember my jaw dropping. Because Thor coming to Earth, how could I have not seen that coming? But I didn't. And that's what makes that moment so special to me. I will never forget that. And even knowing that it's coming every time I see this movie again, yeah, it still gets me every time. Chills. I get literal chills. It's so good. But of course the battle has to get desperate enough, even with Thor, and that Scarlet Witch has to be called out into the battlefield, which makes Vision vulnerable. That's what I love about this movie, is that each move is like a chess move, planned methodically and strategically so that every little thing makes sense. And now that Wanda's on the field, Vision's there, and Corvus accordingly goes after him. Another underrated moment in the battle is where Steve comes and rescues Vision after Bruce and Cull Obsidian go somewhere else to tussle for the sake of, killing every member of the Black Order. Because, you can't have any of them standing, right? But yeah, I just really love how the Russos and Marcus and McFeely thematically call back the idea of trading lives, and how Vision realizes the value of this as well, and he refuses to give his own up, even though he probably knows it'll end in their collective demise. Moving back to Titan for just a hot minute, let's take a look at what's happening there. So Thanos arrives after getting the Soul Stone, and this is where he explains his backstory to Doctor Strange. And again, I just have to commend the writers and the directors, as well as Josh Brolin, for the portrayal of this character. Because when he explains his grand plan and his reasoning behind his actions, you can tell. You can just tell. He's embittered because no one would listen to him, but at the same time, he's wholly and truly believes that he's right. Just like Killmonger, just like Vulture, the best villains are the ones that believe what they're doing is the right thing. And he is so convinced that it's just too late to turn back now. This villain is just a feat or a marvel, if you will, of good storytelling, and the fact that he works so well is amazing. Later, when he tells Stark that he has his respect, it's almost like a sparring match, where Thanos is acknowledging that his opponent fought well. I love that line. But yeah, we get to see our Titan battle, and we get to see all the heroes using their different powers. I love it when Peter says, magic, more magic, magic with a kick, before Thanos throws him to the ground. Classic Spider-Man. And eventually, as we all know, they come inches away from getting the gauntlet off before Peter Quill screws it up. I can make a whole video called The Defense of Peter Quill, but at this point, I think we're all okay with it because of Endgame, so I'll keep it brief here. I think that not only does this action line up so well with his character, but I think that if a lot of us were put in that exact same situation, I think we would have been equally as mad. Think about it. Peter Quill makes a joke out of it earlier, but seriously, he's lost his mother, his father, and now the love of his life. That's not a joke to him. And while I think that there might have been better alternatives to Peter smacking Thanos in the face, I still think that it was extremely effective. Also, Nebula's here. Hi, Nebula. In all seriousness, I'm not going to spend too much time on her character because A, she barely does anything in this movie, and B, the video is probably 60 years long by now, and so is this movie, so onwards! So yeah, after Thanos gets the gauntlet back, we get some awesome fights. Doctor Strange v Thanos is one of the best things to come out of this movie because before the fight, Doctor Strange was just waving around orange sparkly rings. But now, the possibilities are wide open for what Strange can do. The amount of spells he casts and just the one-on-one action between him and Thanos are just great. Love it. Absolutely love it. And then, of course, we get to see Tony versus Thanos. First of all, have to say, the CGI in some of these shots, again, is awful. It's horrendous. I mean, look at this picture. This was in Avengers Infinity War. This was seriously in Avengers Infinity War. What happened, guys? Did you run out of budget? Because this is awful. Okay, to be fair, they might have actually run out of budget because this movie probably cost $1 bajillion to make, and Thanos looks awesome, so we'll give it a pass. But yeah, we get to see Tony and Thanos square off. And when he stabbed Tony the first time I saw it, I thought, oh, he's dead. Do I think it was kind of cheap in hindsight? Honestly, I mean, you're not going to kill him, and Nebula heals him almost right away in Endgame, so what's the point? But still, you really get the sense that these are equals fighting, and gotta say, that's really great. I mean, the action is a little contrived, and Iron Man does look a little CGI, because, let's be honest, with 4 Infinity Stones, I think Thanos could have wiped the floor with Iron Man if the power, disparities were realistic. I mean, he did with Hulk earlier with only 1 stone, and he wasn't even using it. But I guess in the end, he does ending up beating him and handing him the loss anyways. And then we get to hear the infamous words now. We're in the endgame. And let's begin the speculation. Avengers 4, Annihilation. Honestly, looking back at these title rumors, they were really dumb. They literally said Endgame in Age of Ultron and in Infinity War. Yeah, remember when we all thought Endgame was going to be about Skrulls? Whoops. And now Thanos moves to Wakanda, where he basically annihilates the Avengers one by one. And I have to say, after hearing that Lizzie Olsen and Paul Bettany basically found out what the scene they were filming was like the morning of, I think they pulled it off brilliantly. The amount of sadness and hurt and tears and just pure emotion coming off of Wanda's face as she's destroying the stone is just masterful. That actually made me feel emotional because I really did feel for Wanda. But of course, Thanos is our so-called protagonist and he's got to get the stones, which he does by cleverly turning back time. Nice touch there, Russos. Genuinely didn't see that coming either. And then he rips the stone out of Vision's head, and that is Avengers Infinity War. The end. Oh, except that he gets, axed in the chest. That sucks. Really must have hurt. So yeah, Thor comes in and basically gloats, and I love this. People complain about Star-Lord being the quote-unquote scapegoat of Infinity War, but if you really think about it, Thor is just as much to blame, and honestly, so is Steve. Steve should have just destroyed the stone in the Avengers compound. He should have made the decision right there and then, and they would have at least been able to fend off Thanos with 5 Infinity Stones, not the full 6. And I think it's a really good touch that Thor stops to gloat before making sure that Thanos can't use the gauntlet, which of course he does. And now we get to the dusting. Now look, we all knew that this was going to get reversed, right? Spider-Man Far From Home was literally coming out 3 months later. So that was the thing. But yeah, we knew that this was going to get turned around, we just didn't know how. That being said, the way that they dusted the big players, Black Panther included, that got a gasp out of me for sure. But a few seconds later I was like, oh, no, he's coming back. So really the dusting came down to the performances for me. Because Anthony Mackie writhing around on the ground for a couple seconds before getting dusted doesn't really do much for me as an audience member. But seeing Peter Parker clinging onto the last bit of life his character has, that's emotionally resonant. Not because we know he's dead, which we don't. In fact, honestly, Peter Parker was probably the safest bet to survive both Infinity War and Endgame. It was rather the raw emotions of the character and the actor and the performance within the scene that sold it. Also the shock value. At the time, just the fact that the heroes lost, yeah, that was shocking. And the final shot is beautiful, it's poetic. We see Thanos sitting down, finally able to rest, and I love that Silvestri's score subtly shifts from a minor key to a major key at the end to signify that Thanos has finally achieved victory. People say that this is an incomplete story. I disagree. This is Thanos' movie. And with that in mind, this is most definitely a 3-act film from beginning to end. You establish his daughter Gamora, and that sets up the sacrifice that he has to make later. The villains, led by Thor and Iron Man, are trying to stop him from saving the universe, and along the way, every single one of his henchmen, or I guess his children, die. But he knows what he has to do to achieve his mission. In a way, this is Thanos' version of Whatever It Takes from Endgame. The Avengers lost Nat and Tony, but ultimately they won in Endgame. And Thanos lost everything he had to win in Infinity War. That's what makes this film so brilliant. This is a character study in a way. Surrounded by all this Avengers action and superhero, Glitz is a broken man who's seeking justice on a world that needs correction in his eyes. In the end, Avengers Infinity War is a film that does everything right within the genre, while also completely shifting it at the same time. And not just the comic book genre either, but all of film. We seldom see a film that's led by the so-called villain who actually wins at the end. I think that's something to be commended. We still have the great action, great character moments, applause time for the audience, but underneath all of that, there's Thanos. And he wins. And so do we as the audience. This may be part 1 for the Avengers, but for Thanos, it's the completion of his journey from beginning to end. I'm going to give Avengers Infinity War an A and a 9.7 out of 10. And now, after writing the script, recording, and editing this video, I'm going to take a page out of Thanos' book.
I finally rest. Watch the sunrise on a grateful universe.
So, that was my in-depth review on Avengers Infinity War. Let me know if you like this longer sort of video format. I can't commit to making this kind of video for every single review because trust me, the amount of work that goes into just writing the script is just not sustainable for my sanity or to maintain a regular schedule. So if you like this video, let me know if you want one for Endgame, and also let me know what other films you'd like me to go in depth on. But after this review, I need a palate cleanser. And we got Ant-Man and the Wasp coming up, luckily. Be sure to subscribe and give this video a like if you enjoyed it. If you want to check out the previous 18 reviews, the playlist link is in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.